Grapevine Valley looked harmless from the outside, the kind of place that made travelers slow down just to breathe in the pine-scented air and admire the neat rows of wooden cabins tucked between the hills. But Harper Sloane knew better. Every town had two faces, the one it showed to the world, and the one it hid behind closed doors. And if Grapevine Valley had a hidden face, Harper could already feel it staring at her from the moment she drove past the faded welcome sign. She wasn't here by choice. She was here because her little sister, Mia Sloane, had vanished exactly 12 days ago, and the local police had already washed their hands of the case, calling it a likely runaway. Harper knew that was a lie. Mia was only 19, anxious by nature, barely able to go to the grocery store alone. Running away was impossible. Something had happened. Something the town didn't want to talk about. The drive had taken her 8 hours from the city, long winding roads through forests that felt untouched for decades. Her phone signal had vanished miles back. Only the radio kept her company, and even that had faded to static. Now, she was completely cut off, no calls, no texts, no contact with the outside world. Grapevine Valley felt isolated, like a pocket of time preserved somewhere between 1970 and a nightmare. Harper's SUV rolled to a stop in front of the small cabin she had rented. The door creaked when she pushed it open, revealing an interior that smelled of dust and old wood. A single lamp flickered when she switched it on. The silence pressed against her ears. She set her bags down, but she couldn't rest. Every minute lost was a minute Mia could be. No, she shut the thought down. She wouldn't let fear control her. First stop, the sheriff's office. The sheriff's building was small, only 2 rooms and a front desk. A pair of deer antlers hung above the door, like a warning. Sheriff Dalton Briggs sat behind his desk, boots on the table, sipping from a chipped mug. He barely looked up when Harper entered. "You must be the sister," he said, voice flat. "We already told you. We're doing what we can." Harper clenched her jaw. "You closed my sister's case." He shrugged. "No evidence of a crime. The girl's 19. Probably left with someone. Happens." "No, it doesn't," Harper snapped. "Not with Mia. She's terrified of strangers. She wouldn't leave her dorm alone, let alone disappear into thin air." Briggs finally lowered his boots and leaned forward. His eyes were cold, but something else flickered behind them. Annoyance? Or fear? "Look," he said, "Grapevine Valley isn't like the city. We mind our business. We protect our own. Outsiders come in stirring things up, pointing fingers. It never ends well." "Is that a threat?" Harper asked. "Advice." Harper stepped closer. Mia didn't evaporate. "Someone knows something. And I'm not leaving until I find her." Briggs stood up, towering over her. "There's a reason people don't go digging in this town." Harper held her ground. "I've never been afraid of the dark, Sheriff. But maybe you should be." For a moment, the air thickened, the silence crackling with unspoken danger. Then Briggs looked away and grabbed a folder from his desk. He tossed it at her. "Your sister's file. That's all there is." It was pathetically thin. 2 pages. A missing poster. A statement from a roommate. No interviews with witnesses. No search parties. No follow-up. Harper felt her stomach twist. This wasn't incompetence. This was intentional. Outside, dusk had begun to settle, the sky shifting from blue to gray. Harper walked back toward her SUV, gripping the folder tightly. A woman stood near the edge of the street, watching her. Then another. And another. Grapevine Valley was full of eyes, observing her every move. As Harper unlocked her SUV, a soft voice behind her said, "You shouldn't stay here alone." Harper turned. A young woman in a brown jacket stood beside a lamppost. She looked pale, anxious, constantly glancing over her shoulder. "Why?" Harper asked. "Bad things happen to girls who start asking questions in this town." Harper studied her. "Do you know something about Mia?" The woman shook her head quickly. "Not here. Not now." "Then when?" The woman swallowed hard. "Tonight. Midnight. Behind the old lumber mill. Come alone." Before Harper could respond, The woman darted away, disappearing down a narrow side road. Harper's heartbeat quickened. This was the first real lead she'd gotten. But midnight at an abandoned lumber mill? That sounded like a trap. Still, what choice did she have? Night came fast in Gray Pine Valley. Harper waited in her SUV until 11:40, rehearsing possibilities in her head. She grabbed a flashlight, a pocket knife, and her phone, even though it still had no signal. The drive to the lumber mill was unsettling. Every tree seemed to lean closer, branches scraping the sides of her vehicle like skeletal fingers. The lumber mill appeared out of the fog, a tall, rusting structure with broken windows and a collapsed roof. The wind howled through the gaps, making it moan like a creature in pain. Harper parked at the edge of the clearing and stepped out, boots crunching on gravel. Her flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing shadows that writhed like living things. She checked her watch. 11:58 p.m. She waited. Minutes crawled by. No sign of the woman. Only silence. Harper began to feel uneasy. Maybe the woman had been scared away. Or maybe...
A sound.
Footsteps. Harper turned sharply, flashlight trembling in her hand. A figure stepped out from behind a pile of rotting logs. It wasn't the woman. It was a man.
Tall. Broad.
Wearing a hooded jacket. His face lost in shadow. "Can I help you?" Harper called out. The man didn't answer. He stepped closer. Then another step. Harper gripped her knife tighter. "Stop right there." He didn't. Her pulse skyrocketed. But before she could react, another sound echoed through the mill, rapid footsteps coming fast. The woman from earlier ran into the scene, breathless. "Run," she yelled. "He's..." Her voice cut off as the man lunged at her. Harper's instincts took over. She swung the flashlight like a weapon, smashing it into the man's arm. He grunted, stumbled back, but didn't fall. Harper grabbed the woman's wrist. "Come on." They sprinted toward the SUV, the man's heavy footsteps pounding behind them. Harper shoved the woman inside, jumped in, slammed the door, and locked it. Her hands shook as she jammed the keys into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and she hit the gas, tires kicking up gravel. The man chased them until the vehicle gained speed. Then he stopped, standing motionless in the road, watching them disappear. The woman sat trembling. Harper's chest heaved. "Who was he?" Harper demanded. The woman swallowed, voice cracking. "He works for them." "For who?" The woman turned toward her, eyes wide with terror. "For the people who took your sister." Harper's blood froze. "And if you stay here," the woman whispered, "they'll take you too." Harper drove fast, the narrow forest road curving sharply, branches slapping against the sides of the SUV as if trying to push it back toward danger. The woman beside her held onto the seatbelt with trembling fingers, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Moonlight filtered through the trees, painting streaks of silver across her frightened face. Harper slowed only when she reached the bright glow of the gas station near the edge of town, the only place with working lights at this hour. She pulled into the farthest parking spot and took a long breath to calm the shaking in her hands. The woman looked like she was on the verge of breaking. "What's your name?" Harper asked gently. The woman hesitated, eyes flicking toward the road behind them as if expecting the hooded man to appear from the shadows. "Elena," she whispered. "Elena Price." Harper nodded.
"I'm Harper."
"And I need you to tell me everything. Who took Mia? Who was that man? What's happening in this town?" Elena pressed her lips together, tears brimming in her eyes. "I shouldn't have contacted you. They'll know by morning. They see everything here." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I should have left town months ago." "But you didn't," Harper said. "Because you're scared. And you know something." Elena's breathing quickened. "Not something. Too much." Harper leaned closer. "Start from the beginning." Elena shook her head violently.
"No.
"We can't talk here. Not in the open." "Then where?" Elena stared straight ahead at the mountains in the distance. "There's an old church outside town. No one goes there anymore. Too far."
"No cameras."
"They won't follow us that far this late at night."
"They."
Harper repeated carefully.
Elena nodded.
The Gray Pine Committee. Harper frowned. The town council? No, Elena whispered, voice trembling. Not the real one. The hidden one. The people who run Gray Pine from the shadows. The ones who decide who disappears. A chill ran through Harper's body. And my sister? Harper asked softly. Elena's voice cracked. Your sister got too close. Just like the others. Harper's heart tightened painfully in her chest. Is she alive? Elena wiped her tears with the sleeve of her jacket. I don't know. I pray she is. But if we don't move now, you won't get another chance. Harper didn't need more convincing. She shifted the SUV into drive. The old church was 15 miles into the hills. The road leading to it was nearly invisible, swallowed by overgrowth and time. Harper parked beneath a cluster of pines, the only light coming from her SUV's beam. The church looked haunting, white paint peeling, roof bowed, windows broken. A rusted bell hung crooked in the tower like a dead limb. Elena pulled her jacket tighter as they stepped out. No one's been here since Pastor Gray died. After that, the town forgot about it. Harper's flashlight cut across old pews and dust that danced in the air. The wooden floor creaked under their feet. Elena stopped near the altar and sank into a pew, hands trembling. I grew up here, she said. I know this town better than anyone. And I know how the committee works. Harper lowered her voice. Tell me everything.
Elena exhaled shakily.
You think your sister is the first to go missing? She said. People vanish from Gray Pine every year. Sometimes it's hikers. Sometimes tourists. And sometimes she looked down. Sometimes it's locals. Why hasn't anyone reported this? Harper asked. They do, Elena said. But the reports are buried. The sheriff tells families they ran away, or overdosed, or moved. And if someone tries to push back, her voice broke. They disappear too. Harper's jaw tightened. Elena continued. The committee watches the whole valley. They own the sheriff, the radio station, the lumber mills, the only internet provider. Outsiders come, and they're watched. Too curious, and they're run out. Dig too deep, and they're taken. And the man at the mill? Harper asked.
Elena shivered.
One of their enforcers. People call him Ridge Runner. He shows up wherever someone is snooping. You were lucky you didn't get caught. Harper's stomach twisted. Why did he go after you?
Elena paused.
Because I used to be one of them. Harper stared at her, stunned. One of who? One of the people who helped cover disappearances. Elena's voice was barely audible now. I worked at the sheriff's office as an assistant. I saw the files. The evidence that never made it to the state. The photos. The reports that Sheriff Briggs threw into the shredder. Harper's breath caught. So, why did you stop? Elena's eyes filled with grief. Because one of the missing girls was my cousin. And when I tried to ask questions, they punished me. They said if I didn't keep quiet, I'd disappear too. Harper sat beside her, absorbing the devastating truth. And Mia? She asked quietly. Elena shook her head. She was asking around campus, talking to locals, asking questions about disappearances. And she asked the wrong person. Who? Harper demanded. Before Elena could answer, a noise echoed outside the church. A crunch of gravel. Footsteps. Harper and Elena froze. Another crunch. Silence. Harper whispered, Stay behind me. She slowly stepped toward the broken window, peeking through the gap. A dim figure stood by the treeline. Too still. Too silent. Harper's pulse hammered. Elena, she whispered. Is there anyone else who comes here?
No, Elena breathed.
No one. The figure stepped forward, and the faint moonlight revealed Sheriff Dalton Briggs. Harper's gut dropped. He wasn't alone. Two more figures stood behind him, and they were carrying weapons. Elena's hands clamped over her mouth. Oh God, she whispered. They followed us. Harper grabbed her arm. Back door. Now. But the moment they moved, a flashlight beam cut through the church window. Briggs' voice boomed. Come out, ladies. Let's not make this difficult. Harper dragged Elena across the church, pushing open the back door. But footsteps sounded there too. They were surrounded. Harper looked around desperately. Is there another exit? There's a cellar door, Elena whispered. But it's under the altar. A loud bang shook the front door. They're breaking in, Harper said. They sprinted to the altar. Harper shoved it aside with all her strength. Beneath it was a wooden hatch covered in dust and cobwebs. Go, Harper ordered. Elena climbed down into the darkness. Harper followed and pulled the hatch shut just as the front door burst open and Boots stormed inside. The cellar was freezing, pitch black, smelling of earth and mildew. Harper crouched beside Elena, both trembling, listening to heavy footsteps above them. Briggs' voice echoed through the church. They couldn't have gone far. Search every corner. Harper centered her breathing. She wouldn't let them take her. She wouldn't let them take Elena. She wouldn't let them win. For Mia. Above them, footsteps grew louder, right over the altar. A boot stepped on the wooden hatch. Then another. The wood groaned. Elena squeezed Harper's hand, tears streaming silently. Briggs' voice lowered. Split up. They're close. Footsteps scattered. Then, silence. Harper didn't move. Didn't breathe. Minutes passed, or maybe it was an hour. In the darkness, time dissolved. Finally, Elena whispered, They're gone. Harper slowly lifted the hatch a sliver, peeking through. The church was empty. They climbed out carefully. Harper's legs shook from adrenaline. Elena whispered, We can't stay in town anymore. They'll find us. Then we don't stay, Harper said. We hit them first. Elena stared at her. You want to fight the committee? I want to expose them, Harper said. You said they destroy evidence. Then we take what they don't know exists.
Elena hesitated.
There is one place they keep everything. Files. Photos. The hard drives. The real truth. Harper's heartbeat quickened. Where?
Elena swallowed.
The old abandoned broadcasting station. KGV 9. They shut it down years ago, but the committee still uses the underground archive room. Harper nodded. Then take me there. Elena stepped back, fear overwhelming her. If we go there, we may not come out. Harper met her eyes, voice steady. They have Mia. I'm not leaving this valley without her. Elena closed her eyes, trembling. Okay, she whispered. Then we move before sunrise. After that, the valley wakes up. Harper held her breath. This was it. Their one chance. Elena looked toward the forest, voice shaking. And pray that the Ridge Runner doesn't find us first. The next morning arrived with a strange heaviness in the air, as if the entire town was holding its breath while Elena prepared herself for another day that would pull her deeper into a mystery she had never asked for but was now completely tangled in, and as she tied her hair into a tight ponytail, she kept thinking about the woman in the doorway the night before, the one who had stared at her with hollow eyes and vanished into the shadows like smoke drifting away from a dying fire, and Elena kept replaying that moment while she filled her thermos with coffee, wondering if the woman was a clue, a warning, or a threat, and wondering too why she felt drawn to her instead of scared, because something inside her whispered that this woman knew something that could change everything. She drove to the station feeling the weight of unanswered questions pressing at her chest, and as she stepped inside, Officer Daniels waved her over with an urgent look telling her that Detective Marshall had found something important, and Elena walked fast down the hallway trying to steady her thoughts because every new clue they found always came with a new twist, a new threat, a new thread that led only deeper into the unknown labyrinth they were entering. And when she reached the room, Detective Marshall was leaning forward over a stack of photographs, his face tight, his eyes serious, and without even looking up he told her that someone had tampered with the county's security database and that the missing files belonged to closed cases, all involving women who had disappeared under strange circumstances over the last 15 years, cases that no one had ever connected before because no one had ever imagined that they could possibly be part of a single thread. Elena stared at the photographs, feeling a sudden chill spread across her skin because three faces stood out to her immediately, three women who looked hauntingly familiar, and then she realized why they looked familiar. They resembled the woman she had seen The night before, the hollow-eyed woman in the woods, and suddenly fear mixed with certainty, and she told Detective Marshall everything she had seen, and the way the woman had stared, and the way she had vanished, and for the first time the detective didn't doubt her. He didn't argue, he didn't dismiss her story, but instead he told her they were going to the woods right now. They arrived at the old trail where the incident had happened 2 nights before, and Elena walked ahead, breathing carefully, listening for any sound, any shift in the wind, any rustle that didn't belong. And as they reached the clearing, she felt the memory return sharply, the cold, the darkness, the slow, deliberate movement of the woman stepping out from between the trees. And when she pointed to the exact spot, Detective Marshall brushed aside the leaves and dirt, revealing something neither of them expected: a partially buried wooden box, not old enough to be antique, but not new either, and Elena froze as she saw her own hands shaking when Marshall asked her to help lift it out. The box was heavy, darker at the edges, as if moisture had crept inside for years, swallowing the wood, and when they pried it open, the smell of damp rot escaped, along with a shock that left Elena speechless, because inside they found photographs of the missing women, newspaper clippings, maps, and scribbled notes that seemed to track each disappearance, and every set of dates and locations was carefully written in the same neat handwriting, and right in the center was a final page that made Elena's breath catch, a page that had her own name written on it, along with this week's date scribbled in red ink, as if someone had been waiting for her, or watching her, or planning something too impossible to understand. Her knees weakened, and she felt the world around her tilt, but Detective Marshall steadied her, telling her to breathe, telling her this only meant that whoever was behind all these disappearances had been tracking her, had known she would take the job, had known she would arrive in this town, and that meant one thing: someone high up, someone connected, someone with access to information no ordinary person should ever have. And as Elena tried to process all of this, she heard a twig snap behind them, so sharp and sudden that both she and Marshall spun around, but the woods were empty, silent, as if swallowing every clue, every footprint, every breath that didn't belong to them. They returned to the station with the box locked in evidence, and Marshall told the chief everything, but Elena sensed something strange, something off, as she watched the chief listen with a blank expression, not reacting with shock or concern or urgency, but instead simply nodding, too slowly, too calmly, and she felt a twist in her stomach, because something about his face felt wrong, as if he wasn't hearing about a new discovery, but hearing about something he had already known about. And suddenly she felt a wave of nausea as she wondered if the danger wasn't coming from outside the walls of the station, but from inside them. That night Elena couldn't sleep again, because the thought that she might already be on someone's list, on someone's plan, on someone's path pulled her awake every time she closed her eyes, and she found herself walking through her small living room in the dark, staring out the windows, listening to the stillness of the night, until her phone buzzed quietly at 2:13 a.m., and when she picked it up, she heard nothing at first, just static and faint crackling, and then the softest whisper, a woman's whisper that said her name, Elena. And the voice was trembling and broken, like someone speaking through tears, and then the whisper said one more thing and named the name of one of the missing women, and then the call ended before she could say anything. Her hands trembled as she stared at the screen, and without even thinking, she grabbed her jacket and drove straight to Detective Marshall's home, because something inside her told her that the voice on the phone was not random, not accidental, not a prank, but a warning, a cry for help. And Marshall opened the door, half asleep, but when he saw her face, he didn't hesitate. He let her in and listened carefully, and after a long, quiet moment, he told her something he hadn't told anyone else, something that he had kept hidden because he didn't trust the department anymore. He told her that one of the missing women was his sister, and that he believed she was still alive, and that he believed all the disappearances were connected to a single person, someone powerful, someone protected, someone who always stayed 10 steps ahead. Elena felt her chest tighten as she realized they were both now fighting the same battle, both risking their lives, both stepping into a storm that had already swallowed others, and she knew that they couldn't trust anyone else, not the chief, not the department, not the people who claimed they were helping, because now they had discovered too much, and now they were being watched. They decided to follow the phone call, the name, the whisper, the one clue that had come to them in the dead of night from a woman who might be trapped somewhere, or running, or hiding, or fading from the world. And they worked through the night using old case files, mapping patterns, connecting places that had never been connected before, until finally the clues began to align like the pieces of a puzzle that had been scattered for years, and the picture that began to form chilled Elena to the bone, because everything pointed to an abandoned cabin miles away from town, deep in the woods, a place No one used anymore a place surrounded by stories of strange noises and flickering light stories no one took seriously because people preferred legends over truth. The sun had not yet risen when they reached the edge of the woods, and Elena felt her pulse rushing in her ears as she stepped out of the car and looked at the fog weaving its way between the trees like fingers pulling secrets into the shadows, and as they walked deeper the silence thickened, as if the forest itself was listening, and when they finally reached the clearing the cabin stood dark and still, its windows boarded, its roof sagging, its presence carrying the weight of years of hidden suffering, and Elena felt a shiver crawl up her spine because she knew she was standing at the entrance to something they weren't prepared for, something that would change everything again, something that held answers, but also danger, and she whispered softly to Marshall that if they stepped inside there would be no turning back. And still they stepped closer. And still the door creaked open, as if someone had been waiting for them. And still they crossed the line into the darkness, not knowing if the truth ahead of them would save the missing women or destroy them too. The cabin swallowed them the moment they stepped inside, as if the darkness pulled in around their shoulders, tightening like a cold cloak, and Elena felt the air shift heavy and stale, carrying the faint scent of dust, old wood, and something else, something metallic, something that made her heartbeat stutter for a moment, and Detective Marshall lifted his flashlight slowly, letting the beam cut through the blackness and reveal a narrow hallway with peeling wallpaper and deep scratches along the walls, as if someone had clawed at them in fear or desperation long ago, and the silence inside was unnatural, thick, unmoving, like the very air didn't want to be disturbed. They moved carefully, step after slow step, and Elena felt her breath shallow when she saw the first door on the left slightly open, its hinges rested, its frame crooked, and when Marshall nudged it with the edge of his boot, the door creaked loudly, echoing through the cabin in a way that made Elena's stomach clench, as though the sound awakened something that had been sleeping. And inside the room, they found old furniture, overturned drawers, pulled-out blankets, ripped and scattered as if someone had searched violently, and not long ago, because the footprints on the dusty floor were still sharp and undisturbed, and Elena crouched examining them, realizing they belonged to more than one person, and she whispered that they weren't alone, not last night, not now, not ever, since they stepped onto this path. Moving deeper into the cabin, they reached what looked like a living room where the boards of the floor groaned under their weight, and the flashlight beam fell across a wall filled with photographs, hundreds of them pinned, overlapping, layered across each other, each one showing the faces of missing women, their eyes staring out cold, frozen in moments long since past, and Elena felt her chest tighten as she reached out, touching one picture gently, as if touching a ghost, and the realization hit her like a blow that whoever lived here had been tracking them all, watching them, following them, recording their lives before taking them, and she felt her throat close as she whispered that this wasn't just obsession, it was planning, calculation, ritual, and Marshall stepped closer, shining the light over the far edge of the wall, and found what made him whisper his sister's name under his breath. The photograph dated 3 months ago, proof she had been alive long after people believed she was gone. A sudden faint thump above them made both of them freeze. The ceiling creaked softly like footsteps slowly moving across old boards, and Elena felt the hair rise on the back of her neck as she whispered that someone was upstairs, someone who either belonged here or shouldn't be here at all, and Marshall motioned for silence, lifting his gun as they moved toward the staircase, and every step they climbed sounded louder than the last, echoing through the empty cabin. Like a countdown, like a warning, like a heart beating too fast, and the second story hallway stretched long and narrow with several doors closed tight, and Elena felt something in her chest tighten again when the last door slowly shifted open just an inch, as if nudged by a whisper of wind or by a hand that had just slipped back out of sight. Marshall nodded, and they approached quietly, and when Elena pushed the door open, the flashlight revealed a room colder than the rest, small and nearly empty except for a wooden chair placed in the center, and lengths of rope abandoned on the floor beside it, and a bloody handprint smeared across the wall, and Elena felt her breath catch as her mind painted images of what this room had seen, what suffering had echoed inside these walls, and she closed her eyes for a moment, grounding herself, fighting the surge of emotion, but when she opened them, she saw something else. Lying on the floor, a scrap of torn fabric, dark blue with tiny embroidered stars, and she recognized it instantly because she had seen the same pattern on one of the photographs downstairs on the coat of a missing woman named Valerie Hayes, who had vanished 5 years earlier. Marshall lifted the scrap gently, his jaw tightening, his eyes dark, and Elena knew what he was thinking, the same thing. She was thinking that the timeline was wrong, that the victims were taken years apart by the public record, but somehow connected in ways no one ever saw, because someone had been hiding them, someone had been moving them, someone had been keeping them alive long enough for stories to fade, for people to give up, and for truth to disappear into the quiet cracks of the world where no one looked. And Elena felt something inside her shift, a mixture of fear and determination, because she realized this wasn't just solving a mystery anymore. This was a race against time, a race to stop whoever was doing this before another woman vanished, before another life was swallowed by the darkness. Another sound interrupted her thoughts, the unmistakable shivering click of a camera shutter coming from downstairs, and Elena's blood ran cold as she looked at Marshall. He looked back at her, and without speaking they rushed down the stairs, their bodies tense, their hearts pounding. But when they reached the bottom, the source of the sound was gone. The room was exactly as they had left it, the wall of photographs motionless, the shadows undisturbed, and Elena's breathing grew uneven because she knew what that sound meant. Someone had been in the cabin with them, someone with a camera, someone who had taken a picture of them or of something in the room before slipping away unseen. And when Marshall's flashlight beam caught a fresh footprint near the front door, the kind made by a boot dragging slightly, as if someone moved fast or ran, she understood they had arrived only seconds too late. They searched around the cabin perimeter, but the fog outside was thick, rolling across the ground like something alive, and it swallowed tracks almost instantly, leaving nothing but the eerie quiet of early dawn. And despite the silence, Elena felt eyes on her, watching from somewhere between the trees, and a shiver crawled down her spine as she realized the hunter they were chasing was hunting them too, and whoever this person was, they were clever, fast, and uncomfortably familiar with the layout of the woods, which meant they were local, which meant they had roots here, which meant they were hiding in plain sight, living among the people, trusting that no one would ever suspect them. And Elena felt a cold unease spread through her chest, because this town seemed innocent on the outside, but underneath something rotten had been festering for decades. They returned to the station exhausted but restless, and Marshall went to analyze the new evidence while Elena stepped outside for fresh air, needing a moment to gather her thoughts. And as she leaned against the cold concrete wall, she noticed a figure standing across the street, motionless, half hidden by the shadow of a streetlight. And at first, she thought it was just a passerby, but then the person stepped forward just enough for her to see the faint glint of something in their hand, something small, metallic like a camera lens, and before she could call out, the figure turned swiftly and disappeared behind a row of parked cars, leaving Elena frozen in place with a sudden chilling understanding that they were being watched everywhere, not just in the woods, not just at the cabin, but here at the station, in public, in broad daylight, by someone bold, fearless, and certain they wouldn't be caught. When she told Marshall about the figure, he immediately checked the station's outdoor camera feeds, but to their surprise, every camera on that side of the building had gone dark exactly 5 minutes before the sighting, as if someone had disabled them remotely or had direct access to them. And when they replayed the feed from earlier that morning, Elena's heart dropped, because the cameras had been working perfectly the entire night until that exact moment, which meant whoever was watching her knew how to manipulate security systems, knew the station layout, knew their movements. And Elena felt the slow building dread of realization that someone inside the system might be helping the person they were chasing, someone with authority or access, someone who had been covering tracks for years. As the day stretched on, Elena found herself unable to shake the feeling of being shadowed, and each time she turned a corner, she expected to see the hollow-eyed woman, or the figure from across the street, or worse, the person behind all of this, someone who blended into the town with practiced ease, someone she might have already met without knowing, someone who might even have spoken to her with a polite smile, while hiding secrets darker than anything she had ever imagined. And when Marshall handed her a file that afternoon with records they weren't supposed to have, ones he got from a trusted contact outside the state, she felt a sudden electric pulse of fear and anticipation, because inside the file was a list of names, women who had been moved between different states over the years, patterns that matched the locations on the maps found in the wooden box in the woods, and all the routes led back to one place, the same place. The cabin belonged to the same land, the same property owner, someone Elena had not expected at all, someone whose name made her breath falter for a heartbeat, because it belonged to the chief of police. A stunned silence filled the room as she stared at the file pages, her mind reeling, her heart pounding with a mix of disbelief and inevitable recognition, because the chief had been too calm, too dismissive, too unconcerned whenever they discovered something that should have shaken him, and now it made sense. So painfully, clearly someone had been using their authority to hide missing women, to manipulate case files, to erase evidence, and Elena felt a sick twist building inside her, because the chief was supposed to protect people, but instead he had been protecting someone else, someone far worse, someone who now knew that Elena and Marshall were getting too close, and she whispered to Marshall that they had to move carefully now because they were dealing with corruption deeper and darker than they had expected. And at that exact moment, the station lights flickered once, twice, then went out, plunging everything into darkness thicker than night, and Elena felt the air turn electric as a deep, unnatural silence filled the building, and somewhere in the shadows a slow, deliberate sound echoed like a boot stepping onto a tile floor, and Marshall grabbed her arm, whispering for her not to move, not to speak, not to breathe too loudly, because whoever had just entered the station was not there by accident, not there for a friendly visit, not there to help, and Elena felt her pulse racing as she listened to the footsteps moving closer, step by steady step, tracing the hallway leading to them until they stopped right outside the door, and for a long, heart-pounding moment, neither she nor Marshall dared to move. Then the doorknob began to turn, and Elena knew in that instant their lives were about to change again in ways they were not ready for. The doorknob turned slowly with a metallic click that echoed through the dark room, as if someone were deliberately twisting it inch by inch, savoring the tension, savoring the fear building on the other side, and Elena felt her pulse thundering so loud she wondered if the intruder could hear it too, and Detective Marshall pressed one finger to his lips, signaling her to stay still, stay silent, stay invisible, while he positioned himself behind the door, his back flat against the wall, his gun held steady in a tight, calm grip that masked the storm of danger swirling around them, and Elena crouched low behind the desk, feeling the cold edge of the wooden frame digging into her shoulder as she listened to the slow creaking of the hinges, the door opening wider, letting in a faint sliver of dim emergency light from the hallway, casting tall, warped shadows across the floor like stretching silhouettes. The footsteps entered, soft, measured, almost confident, as if the person knew the layout of the room without needing the lights, and Elena held her breath, watching the faint shift of movement as the shadow crossed the floor, passing within feet of her hiding place, and for a moment she wondered if the intruder could sense her, if they could feel the fear radiating off her skin the way animals could sense a silent predator stalking close, and she closed her eyes, praying the darkness would protect her, praying the person would leave, when suddenly a flicker of light burst through the window as the backup generator kicked on, restoring a faint glow to the hallway, and in that split second of illumination the intruder turned their head, and Elena saw the shape of their profile, sharp, familiar, chilling. It was the chief. The realization struck her chest like a blow, and she almost gasped, but she clamped her hand over her mouth, stopping the sound, while the chief scanned the room, his eyes cold, his expression unreadable, and Marshall remained hidden behind the door, so perfectly still that even the shadows did not betray him, and Elena felt a coil of dread loop inside her stomach, because now she knew with absolute certainty that they were not just chasing a predator, they were chasing someone protected, someone shielded. Someone who had decided to step into the darkness personally because things were getting too close, and the moment the chief took a step toward her direction, Marshall sprang from behind the door, grabbing the chief from behind and forcing him to the ground in one swift movement. The struggle was silent, violent, desperate, with the chief twisting his arm, trying to reach for something at his waist, and Marshall pinned him down, pressing his knee into the chief's spine while the man growled out curses low and venomous, and Elena rushed forward, grabbing the chief's hands while Marshall secured him with cuffs, and for a moment everything seemed still, everything seemed possible, everything seemed like they might finally have caught the person responsible. But then, as Marshall reached for the chief's pocket to search him, a second shadow appeared at the doorway, a tall figure dressed in dark clothing, wearing a hood that obscured their face, and before either Elena or Marshall could react, the figure raised a stun gun and fired. The electric crackle filled the air as Marshall collapsed, and Elena screamed, rushing toward him, but the intruder seized her arm, twisting it behind her back with brutal force, pressing something sharp against her ribs, forcing her still, and the chief climbed to his feet, breathing Heavily, a dark smile spreading across his face as he told her she should have left this case alone, that she should have ignored the calls, the clues, the cabin, the voices, because she had no idea how deep the roots of this operation went. And Elena felt a wave of rage push against her fear, because she was staring into the face of someone who had betrayed his oath, betrayed the community, betrayed every woman who had gone missing over the years, and yet stood there calm, cold, confident that he would walk away again without consequence. But then something unexpected happened. From the hallway came a distant but unmistakable sound, the crack of breaking glass, followed by hurried footsteps and shouts, voices Elena recognized from the patrolling officers, who must have noticed the power outage on one side of the station, and the chief stiffened, eyes narrowing as the footsteps approached, and his partner, the hooded figure, shoved Elena forward hard, sending her stumbling to the floor before both of them bolted through the back exit, disappearing into the night. And Elena crawled to Marshall, shaking his shoulder, trying to rouse him while yelling for help as officers rushed in, and once they stabilized him, they spread out across the building searching for the chief and the mysterious second person, but the night swallowed them both without a trace. Hours passed like minutes as chaos rippled through the department, officers arguing, disbelief spreading, uncertainty rising, and Elena stood in a storm of motion, feeling numb and fiery all at once, because now everyone knew the truth. Now no one could deny the evidence, the connections, the disappearances tied to someone they trusted, and the FBI was called in, taking statements, scanning the cabin, collecting everything Elena and Marshall had found. And when Marshall finally woke, groggy but steady, he looked at her with a fire in his eyes, a fire that told her he wasn't stopping, he wasn't walking away, he was more determined than ever now that the nightmare had a face, a name, a betrayal that cut deep. Over the next days, the investigation intensified, and Elena felt time slip into a strange rhythm, sleepless nights blurred with frantic days as agents uncovered more hidden files, more secret financial records linking the chief to private facilities across multiple states, facilities that disguised themselves as rehabilitation centers, but housed something far darker, something that preyed on vulnerable women, and Elena felt sick each time she reviewed another file, another photograph, another name. Because the scale of the operation was larger than anyone imagined, stretching far beyond their quiet town, far beyond the woods, far beyond the cabin where echoes of pain still lingered in the floorboards. One night, while she was documenting witness statements, she felt a strange sensation again, the feeling of being watched, not from the static cameras or from across the street, but from somewhere closer. And when she stood and walked to the window, she saw her reflection, first faint and ghost-like, but behind it, in the corner of the room, she saw movement, a shifting shadow, and her heart thudded once hard before she turned, but found nothing, only silence, only the whisper of her own breath. And she told herself it was exhaustion, lack of sleep, fragments of fear clinging to her mind, but deep inside, she knew someone was watching, someone who hadn't disappeared, someone who remained hidden, playing a game with her, waiting for the right moment. The next morning, Marshall came to her with news that made her stomach twist. The chief's car had been found abandoned near the state border, burned to its frame, leaving no body, no trace, no clear answer, and Elena felt a cold wave roll down her spine, because a man who knew how to disappear had disappeared, and a man who had hidden women for years now had the entire country looking for him, but still managed to vanish, as if swallowed by the shadows he had created. And Marshall rubbed his forehead, saying, the worst part wasn't the chief escaping, the worst part was that they still had no identity for the hooded figure, the second person, the silent attacker, someone who moved with precision, someone trained, someone dangerous, someone who had stayed one step ahead the entire time. Elena felt her frustration burning, but beneath it, she sensed something more personal, a lingering connection to the silent figure, a memory she couldn't grasp but felt every time she replayed the moment they grabbed her. And as she stared at the cabin photographs again, her eyes stopped on one image, the hollow-eyed woman from the woods, the woman who had whispered her name, the woman who seemed to drift through the mystery like a ghost, leaving breadcrumbs and warnings. And Elena murmured softly that maybe the key wasn't chasing shadows, maybe the key was finding her, maybe the woman wasn't haunting them, but helping them, guiding them, showing them the truth piece by piece in the only way she could. And then the phone rang. A soft, vibrating hum cutting through the quiet, telling her something new was about to begin, something she wasn't ready for, something that could either break open the final piece of the case or drag her into a deeper danger, because on the screen was no number, no contact, no origin, just one word. Unknown. And Elena slowly lifted the phone to her ear, breath held tight in her chest, heart pounding in a rhythm that whispered this call would change everything again. Emily didn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the same thing. The masked figure standing outside the motel window, staring. But now she was safe, at least for the moment, inside Agent Cole Turner's secure cabin deep in the Montana woods. No cell signal. No road signs.
No neighbors.
Whoever is after you, Cole said, setting coffee in front of her, is highly trained. Military level. They didn't just want you dead, they wanted you silenced. Emily wrapped her hands around the warm mug, trying to stop the shaking. I think it's connected to the wallet, she whispered. Cole nodded. Let me see it. Emily placed the small leather wallet on the table. Cole put on gloves, opened it carefully, and pulled out the folded piece of paper inside. His eyes widened. What is it? Emily asked. Cole's voice went low. It's a cipher code, and not a normal one. This is something we use for deep cover informants. Whoever the victim was, they were working undercover. Emily froze. So the person I found was a federal agent? Highly possible. Cole scanned the symbols again, then looked up sharply. This wasn't just a random murder. You walked into a classified operation. Emily swallowed hard. And the killer, Cole continued, is still out there because the mission isn't finished. A loud thud shook the cabin wall. Emily's heart stopped. Cole's gun was out in a second. He motioned her behind him and stepped toward the window. Silence. Then, another thud. Harder. Cole whispered, "Stay low." He took slow steps toward the door, peeking through the blinds. Nothing. Just trees.
Snow.
Darkness. Emily held her breath. Cole quietly unlatched the door. Opened it. The cold wind rushed in, and with it something fell at their feet. Emily screamed. It was a dead crow, its wings broken, its body marked with the same symbol she had seen carved next to the murdered man in the forest. Cole lifted his eyes. We've been found. The dead crow lay on the wooden porch, its black feathers twitching in the icy wind. Emily covered her mouth, holding back a scream. Cole stepped outside slowly, scanning the tree-line with his gun raised. Stay behind me, he whispered. The forest was silent. Too silent.
No birds.
No wind. No movement. Like the entire world was holding its breath. Cole crouched and studied the crow more closely. The strange carved symbol on the bird's wing was identical to the one carved into the tree near the dead undercover agent Emily had found. Emily whispered, "What does it mean?" Cole exhaled sharply. "It's a hunter's mark." Her heart dropped. "Hunter? You mean?" "I mean someone is telling us we're prey." He grabbed the crow using a cloth and set it inside an evidence bag. Emily's voice trembled. "They know we're here?" Cole nodded. "This location is off-grid. Only a handful of people even know it exists. Which means," he paused, eyes narrowing, "which means someone inside the system is feeding information to the killer. A betrayer. Inside the agency." Emily felt a coldness in her stomach that was worse than fear. A sudden crack echoed through the forest. A branch snapping. Cole froze. Without warning, he grabbed Emily's wrist and pulled her back inside the cabin. "Down," he hissed. They took cover behind the counter, just as a bullet shattered the window. Emily screamed, and Cole pressed his hand over her mouth to keep her quiet. Another shot. This one closer. Cole whispered into her ear, "They're not trying to kill us yet." Then he leaned back, eyes sharp. "They're trying to scare you." Sarah steadied her breath as she stood in the basement where the air felt cold but sweat still traced the back of her neck, and her eyes moved slowly across the shelves loaded with old boxes and forgotten files, and every corner looked like someone had abandoned it in a hurry, as if they sensed that one day the truth would crawl out of the shadows. And Sarah lifted her flashlight and felt a tremor inside her chest when she noticed a leather file pushed behind a stack of dusty folders, and the moment She touched it. The worn cover gave a faint crack like a whisper from the past, and her heart tightened because she knew right away that this file was not supposed to be here, not in this basement, not hidden like a buried confession. And as she opened it, her breath caught when she saw a name written in faded ink: Lena Morrison, the same girl Sheriff Collins had always labeled as a runaway, even though every witness statement hinted otherwise. And as Sarah flipped deeper through the pages, she found a set of pictures showing Lena being guided into a red pickup truck, the plate number barely visible under layers of dirt, and yet just clear enough for Sarah to recognize the make and model because it matched exactly the old truck Collins drove for years. And the shock hit her so hard, she felt her knees weaken as all the puzzle pieces finally locked together, forming a horrifying truth that had been sitting in front of the town for over a decade. And she shoved the file into her bag and headed up the steps, but before she reached the top, the wooden door slammed shut with a violent sound that echoed like a warning, and a heavy presence filled the space behind her. She turned slowly and saw Sheriff Collins standing at the bottom of the stairs with a cold, dead stare that belonged more to a predator than a lawman, and his hand rested on his gun like he had been waiting for this moment. And Sarah felt fear and fury crash together inside her chest, and Collins spoke with a voice so calm it felt sickening as he said, "You thought you were going to expose someone. You thought you were brave enough to reveal what keeps this town safe, but you never understood who keeps Lakewood running." And Sarah forced herself to hold his gaze and said, "A safe town is one where women don't disappear, where people
Don't have to fear the man who swore to protect them."
Her words sliced something inside Collins, and his face twitched with a dark smirk as he said, "Lena said something similar. You should ask her how that turned out." And he lifted his gun toward her, and time seemed to freeze around Sarah, and for a split second, she believed this was the end of her story, that truth had pushed her straight into the grave she fought to avoid. But at that moment, footsteps echoed from behind Collins, and Detective Morris stepped into the basement with her gun raised steady and fearless as she shouted, "Sheriff, drop it." And Collins spun toward her, but he didn't look scared, he looked insulted. And he said, "You two have no idea what kind of people you are crossing. This town is built on a network you cannot even imagine, and getting rid of both of you would simply be maintenance." He fired first, but Morris was faster, and her shot knocked his weapon from his hand, and the sheriff collapsed on the floor, breathing hard until he suddenly stopped moving. And Sarah stood frozen because she had just watched a man trusted by an entire town reveal himself as the monster behind years of missing women. And the moment police and federal agents stormed the place, they uncovered dozens of hidden files and chilling evidence proving Collins was not acting alone but belonged to a network of people who had quietly manipulated cases, mislabeled runaways, and buried investigations to protect their crimes. And when news outlets broke the story, Lakewood became a national headline, and Sarah's report spread across the country, and people called her brave and fearless and a truth teller. But even with all the praise, Sarah felt an unsettling heaviness inside because the truth had cost her more than she expected. She had lost the sense of safety she once carried. She had seen trust shatter in the eyes of people who once welcomed her, and she had learned that exposing darkness did not always make you a hero in the eyes of everyone. Some people could only see the pain she surfaced, and some still believed Collins was a good man, and she knew. The hardest moment of all was when she stepped outside the police station days later and saw Collins's young son waiting for her, and the boy walked up with trembling hands and said, "My dad wasn't a bad man, he helped people." And Sarah felt her heart collapse because she had given this child a pain he never deserved, and she crouched down and touched his shoulder gently and said, "Sometimes the people we love hide the darkest secrets, but none of it is your fault." And those words stayed with her for nights because that moment showed the real cost of seeking truth, the hidden emotional bruise no one ever sees. Months passed as Lakewood slowly stitched itself together. The town appointed a new sheriff. The courts convicted several members of Collins's circle, but many files remained missing, and a handful of people slipped through the cracks, and Sarah realized this case would never be neatly closed because criminal networks spread like roots, deep and tangled, and cutting one branch never destroys the whole tree. But she also understood that this journey was not an ending for her. It was the beginning of a new purpose. She would keep digging, she would keep exposing, she would keep telling the stories that everyone else tried to bury. And in the final quiet moment, she sat at her desk staring at a fresh set of documents about another woman missing in another town under circumstances that felt too familiar. As she let out a slow, painful breath, then whispered to herself, "Let's do this one more time," and the screen fades to black as the final line of narration says, "Truth does not always win, but those who fight for it never stop, and because of them, hope still survives."